Koo, for anyone who wants to get into the filmmaking business right now, what are some of the essential pieces of equipment they need to have in terms of the camera, computer, and editing system? What would you advise that people purchase?
I think that's the great thing about getting into filmmaking right now is that you need so little. You know, really you can do it yourself. You know, with a DSLR, with a laptop, with it used to be Final Cut, but now I would say Premiere, or I guess if you're learning now, maybe Final Cut 10 is great actually. But that I think filmmakers these days don't know how good they have it, and of course the generation before me was probably saying that about me. But essentially, it's so much easier now to get a passably good-looking image, with a shallow depth of field. You have a large sensor camera that it looks like a movie when you go shoot something for very little now, and that wasn't the case until a few years ago with the explosion of DSLRs. So it's a great time to be making movies with very little money, as far as getting your foot in the door and making something that resembles a movie. When I was in school, we were shooting on VHS cameras. So no matter how good you're writing, no matter how good you're directing, at the end of the day, it was going to be terrible. So it's nice to be able to go make something with the tools that are out there for very little now, that and actually have it, look and sound good.
Any advice on staying ahead of the curve? It seems like so many things are wonderful. There's so many wonderful products and they do look like film, but then they're obsolete in 2 to 3, 4, 5 years. Is that just the nature of the beast, or are there certain things that you can purchase that will kind of keep you ahead of the curve that won't be as obsolete in the next few years?
I just think as a filmmaker, you can't get caught up in worrying about being on the latest version of whatever's out there. We cover those things on No Film School, and it's great to check in and know what what the latest greatest tool is. But ultimately, storytelling is timeless, and it's a very rare situation that your camera or your equipment is going to be the thing that makes or breaks your film.
Someone said once that like part of being a filmmaker is what do they say, gear addiction. Mm-hmm. That you get this sort of gear acquisition addiction, and it's just part of, you just know that your bank account's going to take a hit, and it's just part of the thing. Is that something that you have to accept, being in this business or having this hobby?
Gear addiction is something. It's something that I've suffered myself. I'm a gear addict. Hello, my name is Ryan. But it's one of those things where I think it also demonstrates your commitment to your craft. And for me, ever since I was in high school, there could have been a situation where I would buy a nice fill in the blank, or are you going to go buy a car? Are you going to go do this? And for me, I was always spending money on gear because I believed in myself and I believed in the stories I wanted to tell. And the nice thing, of course, is that the gear you buy now, it may be obsolete, but you can still sell it. And so as you're sort of building up these tools that you have in your wheelhouse, I think that, you can view the addiction as a bad thing, but it's not bad to invest in yourself. And that's essentially what I think buying these tools represents.
In terms of research as to which brand or whatever someone needs to do for the various products they want to buy, how much do you spend? I know things are different because you're running a website dedicated to looking that up, but how much time would you say the average person should dedicate to looking up the different reviews and things like that on different products?
Are we saying how much time or how much money that you spend on these things?
Or a little bit of both, but
okay.
Yeah, how much sort of due diligence should you do in researching what brand versus Canon, Nikon, whatever?
The way I view it is I spend most of my time working on, at this point, screenwriting. A few months ago it was directing or editing, depending on what stage I'm at with various projects. But when I'm surfing the web, or if I were somebody reading No Film School, if I weren't writing and managing No Film School, if I was reading these things, I see that time as something that you're doing instead of watching football on Sunday. To me, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. It's like I'm on this website and I'm reading about these things because I care about it. And quite frankly, I think a lot of people do these things while they're at a day job they don't want to be at. So, I'm reading and researching materials not instead of working on a screenplay, but in addition to it. And I think on the money side of the equation, there are a lot of ways that you can invest in equipment that don't require you to have a lot of money yourself. One is, are there loans? Is there financing you can get? I know that when I bought a Red camera, I went and applied for a credit card that had 0% interest for 21 months. So I paid it off. It was like $300 a month for the next 2 years essentially, but I didn't have the money in my account at the time when I went to buy it, and then I sub-rented it through a rental house so that it was generating income on its own. So, I think some people saw an article I wrote that said I was buying a Red, and they assumed that, I had a lot of money in my bank account, and why was I, as an indie filmmaker, spending money on a camera instead of the film itself, when actually that camera basically ended up costing me nothing because I put it on a card and I paid it off through sub-rentals. So I think you have to be savvy as a businessman when you're investing in this equipment. And then if you're not sub-renting it like I have, think about what kind of income it's generating for you, whether you run a production company or whether you're a DP. Can it add to your day rate? And just making those calculations, it's something that can, it should be paying you, not vice versa.
Wow, that's a great point. Yeah, so using credit cards, but using it in a smart way where you could avoid the finance charge. And in terms of how much research did you do before you decided on that was the camera that you wanted? And again, it's different because you're the head of no film school, so I get that. But in terms of like someone else that maybe isn't doing that doesn't run a website, how much do you think they should devote to researching?
I think it's not, as I said, it's not going to make or break your projects. I think there's no such thing as the best camera. There's only the best tool for the jobs that you do, and depending on whether you shoot documentaries, or whether you shoot weddings, or whether you shoot features, all of those things are going to be different. But ultimately, it's great to be a filmmaker now because the tools are so good and they work in various lighting conditions. They can shoot different frame rates. They have audio inputs. The DSLRs are being hacked to do raw video. It's an amazing time to be a filmmaker, and I wouldn't worry about, well, I have this camera and he has that camera, therefore his movie's going to look better or worse. It's not really going to be the make or break point, I think.
Can you tell us the camera that you purchased? What was it again?
It was a Red Scarlet.
Okay. And what were the major factors in you purchasing that camera, and why didn't you rent it versus just outright buying it?
I think it's a really tough question for people to, I think, when you make those decisions, you don't necessarily know at the time whether it's the right or the wrong decision. You just sort of have to go off of a sense and a projection of what you're going to be working on. The reason that I liked the Red was I felt it did a lot of things in the camera that other cameras you needed to attach a lot of doodads to. Whether if you wanted to get 4K on another camera, you have to attach an external recorder normally. If you want to record to compressed RAW, that's not even an option for most of these other cameras, even though Red has been doing it now for 5 years. So I felt like it was something that once they were getting supported by editing systems, so that you can just drag in the R3D files to the timeline and cut natively, it was something that gave you a lot of flexibility for high-end projects, something that you could go shoot a feature on, but also something that you could use, as a compact package to go film an interview, So the versatility of the tool is what made me think I'm comfortable investing in this because it goes in different directions. Whereas I think some of the other cameras are more specialized and their limitations hold you back from certain productions. But, the camera market is changing. I don't know that I'll be shooting on a Red forever. You don't know what's coming out around the corner. But thankfully most of these professional tools hold their value decently. So when you're selling or, Red has an upgrade program. So just the idea that it's going to last you for a number of years is the calculation for me is thinking about how much use can I get out of this and for how long.
And was that also what factored into you purchasing it rather than renting it? It's kind of like leasing a car versus buying it. Did you know that there'll be additional things I'll want to shoot with it? This is not the last time I'm going to use this, or?
I think as indie filmmakers, we have this romantic idea that if you own the equipment, you're not going to be held back from having an idea and going and shooting something for no money with your friends and getting it in the can because you already spent the money on the camera, so it's not costing you anything to go make this movie, right? And there's nothing wrong with that idea, and I certainly share that myself. And I think that's kind of like the calculation behind buying something. Because typically, if you're only going to rent, for me, I'm not doing freelance work. I'm working on my own projects, and so it takes me a lot of time to write and go through pre-production and do that. I'm not going to be using the camera that many days out of the year, but I do like the idea that we can go make this thing with the equipment we have, as opposed to like setting up a budget and getting production insurance and getting rentals and having to build that whole thing every time you go shoot something.
Koo, in your opinion, what are some of the best documentaries on the craft of filmmaking?
That's a good question. We talk about a lot of documentaries and books on No Film School. That's kind of part of the philosophy behind the site, is that if you don't have money to go to film school, or if you're not someplace where they have a film school nearby that you can get to, that you can learn a lot of this stuff through documentaries, through books, through websites like mine and like yours. To me, my favorite learning tool for filmmaking, as far as things that are accessible to anybody, anywhere, has just been listening to directors' commentaries on DVDs. I think you really get into the shoes of the person making the creative decisions, and I think you can learn a lot that way. So that's been sort of my documentary about filmmaking that I've sort of perpetually been watching. It's just listening to the directors that I admire talk about, why they made this decision, or the challenges of the shoot, or, working with that actor, and the kind of on-set, or not even just on set, end to end, from pre-production all the way through delivery. They talk about these things in the documentaries. I mean, in the commentaries. So that's kind of the documentary to me that I've liked a lot.
Koo, we want to talk about nofilmschool.com in terms of how many page views does it get each month? What were the page views starting out, and how did you get this tremendous growth that we've seen over the last year?
Sure. I actually had launched No Film School as a personal blog in 2005, and that's what actually got me a job in New York City, and I moved up there. But really, the website that we think of it as today, I launched in January of 2010, and at that point, just because it was a personal blog, it was averaging, I think, 39 views a month or something. Like, no one was reading it. So for all intents and purposes, it started at zero. And so now we're doing 2 million page views a month. We've been growing fairly consistently since I launched it. And it's been great. I mean, when I launched the site, I had no idea whether anyone was going to read it. I only spent a week designing it because I didn't want to sort of front load all the work and then find out that, I built it, but no one came. So it's been great to sort of have the community there, and we're currently completely redesigning, and we'll be relaunching it soon, I hope. But yeah, so we're doing 2 million a month. And what was the other question?
When you started out, I just want to go back to starting out that personal blog back in 2005. What was your desire behind it? I think that's great that you had a passion for it and you went for it. Probably never thinking that it would ever turn into this. So you just wanted something like in your spare time to kind of, you're passionate about cameras and filmmaking. From
2003 to 2005, I was a video producer in North Carolina, which is where I'm from. And I went and shot a documentary in the Amazon jungle in Ecuador. And I could only shoot it during my vacation that I had accrued. So I went for 2 weeks. And that was really the breaking point of realizing I can't be a filmmaker and have a full-time day job at the same time. And I knew that I didn't want to go to film school, thus purchasing the URL. And so me launching the personal blog was a way of putting myself out there, knowing that I was recently unemployed of my own volition, and that I was going to be trying to get myself to New York City, but I didn't know anyone in New York. So how can I reach across geographic boundaries? Well, the internet. That's the great thing about the World Wide Web. So really, it was just me talking about movies a lot, and I ended up interviewing with an indie film company in New York who didn't hire me and sort of fell off the face of the earth. But somebody else read what I was writing about these experiences, and I saw that his signature said senior producer at MTV. So, that contact initially was because of my website. And that's really when I, learned sort of about the power of the internet. And that's really what motivated me to keep doing what I've been doing. And unfortunately, they were hiring graphic designers at the time, and I wasn't a graphic designer, but that didn't stop me from saying that I was a graphic designer. So, I was able to lie my way into a job in New York based on creating a fake portfolio and putting on a suit and driving myself there and taking this interview, and then doing Photoshop training on the train every day to and from work. But that was kind of the impetus behind the power of the internet, and sort of knowing how it hit home personally was being able to get myself from an unemployed kid living in North Carolina with my parents to working as a senior designer at MTV in the middle of Times Square because of my website.
When you first launched that blog, how many hours a day were you putting into it? I'm sure now it's probably every waking minute, but in terms of back then, what were you putting into it?
Well, when I first launched it in 2010 as the current site, it was a full-time job essentially. Not a full-time job posting content, but I wasn't somebody who knew how to run a website. I didn't know things about search engines and inbound traffic and marketing and advertisements and monetization and all the sort of things that you would see on a website if you went to a website and there was a masthead and it was editor, managing editor, biz dev, outreach, publicity, all of those things I had to learn about. And so when I launched the site, I told myself, I'm going to post one thing a day. That way people will know that there's something new here every day, so they can come back, and it's not going to be something where I post one thing and there's nothing for 3 months. But during that first year of growing the website from nothing, it was just research. Most of my time was spent learning about these things. And they're great things to know about now. But I essentially had to put my film career on hold for a year while I learned about all these other aspects of running a website. And then once I'd been running it for a year and we reached a certain traffic level, that's when I was able to sort of cut down on the research, just run the website, and work on my screenplay at the same time.
What do you think has been the most important thing in getting that traffic, or is probably a combination of many things? Can you share some tips for other people that want to start their own site, whatever it is, if it's about food trucks or whatever it is, sewing?
I think, with websites, there are so many websites out there that the challenge of launching a website is that someone comes and they read something at your site or they watch a video at your site and they never come back because there's just so many out there. So the challenge is, how do you keep people coming back to your site? And of course there are the usual approaches of just having better content, and trying to do a better job and making sure that your content is better written than other people's. But to me, the thing that we ended up being successful with was when I wrote this DSLR cinematography guide, which was, or still is, because we're a little bit out of date now, we need to update it, and we're going to do that when we have some time.
Spare time,
yeah. But so that's 100 and something pages, and we gave it away for free in exchange for an email address, and anyone can sign up for it and then unsubscribe if they don't want to get our updates. But that was the thing that really, I think, kept us on people's minds. And so you came and you got this guide, and then you started getting emails and coming back to our site. So that way we were able to grow our community from week to week and month to month, as opposed to just sort of having this revolving door of people coming and then forgetting about the site.
If someone does want to start their own site from scratch and just kind of dip their toe in the water, what's sort of the quick and dirty, what are some of the tips? Get the domain name. Would you advise WordPress, a Wix site? Like what are some of just the quick things you can advise to someone?
That's a good question. I think for example, WordPress is great. I've built a lot of sites on it. You can't beat the price. It's free, and you can customize it every which way. But I think it's like cameras. Every film project requires a different camera would be best for different kinds of film projects, and websites are the same. We're actually going to be migrating off of WordPress for our next version, not because WordPress is bad, but just what you're trying to do has a different tool. So something like Wix or Behance does a lot of portfolio sites, and they're now part of Adobe's Creative Cloud. If you're using their software, you now have this portfolio website software included. Vimeo Pro is also something where you can sort of host your own business and host your video and all those sorts of things. So I think it depends on whether you're primarily trafficking in video or whether you're a news site, whether you're a community. A lot of people use like vBulletin for forums. It's just sort of knowing what you're doing right now and where you want to take it, and then thinking about which tools are going to get you there, I think.
How important is it to respond to comments in terms of building your website, whether it's just in the thread underneath each article or also via social media?
Yeah, I think about it more from the perspective of community engagement. And right now on No Film School, it's comments on blog posts. Going forward, it's going to be much more of a community where people can talk to each other and post their own things. And I think for a blog, it's very important because you are not just, it's not, we like to think about it at No Film School as it's not a lecture. It's not a professor up in front of a blackboard talking to all of his students. It's, a class where there's a circle and we're one of the, maybe we're a moderator or something, but everyone is basically talking to each other. So I think it's very important just how you think about the community, whether that be comments or whether that be social media. And I think, we've done, and we do a good job of responding to comments, I think, but as far as the social media aspects and other things that we could be doing, we just haven't been able to do what I would like to do because it's right now it's essentially just a blog. But that's going to be changing, and I think the most valuable thing you can have as a website is a community that is passionate and comes back regularly and finds value in the site that they're participating in, whether that be in comments or some other sort of interaction.
Do you remember going back to when you got your first comment, your first interaction from someone reading, and how was that, and how diligent were you in responding?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things about starting a website from scratch is feeling like you're, putting stuff out there and no one's reading it. And of course, I'm sure you guys have seen as well that you could have 1,000 people read an article and not have a single comment, or many more than 1,000. So it's very discouraging at the beginning. And I don't remember what the first comment was, but I do remember years later feeling like, well, no one can really say anything to me now that is going to surprise me. Because by the time I brought on other writers to the site, I had written 1,000 posts and there were 20,000 comments on the site. So I felt like getting comments is a very good skin thickening procedure where you have to believe in yourself and you have to sort of stick to your guns. And at the same time, it's great to listen and you hear a lot of different perspectives on your work and what you're doing. But I actually should go back and look at what the first comment was, because I know for a fact that if you go back to the very first post on my site from 2005 where I say, hey, I'm an unemployed kid in North Carolina, I'm not going to film school, but I don't know where this film career is going, let's find out. To this day, there are still 0 comments on that post. So I'd have to go back and look and see which one actually somebody said something. And I'm sure it's just a friend of mine saying, hey Ryan, you suck, or something, but I'll go friend that one and put it on the wall.
Do you remember when you finally launched No Film School on Twitter or Facebook? Was that simultaneous with?
Oh, we
Twitter
were late.
wasn't around then.
We were late. Yeah,
Oh.
I was late to Twitter. We haven't been great about our social media presence, and we need to improve at that a lot. But it's just one of those things where there are only so many hours in the day, and we've really focused on creating content, sharing content, and hopefully we'll become more of a social media presence going forward.
Well, obviously 2 million hits a month, you're doing something right. So maybe the thing you're doing right is staying off social. I mean, I see so many people on social media, and I've had to pull back myself, that it's like, is this really, I mean, I hate to say this, but sometimes it's like a giant circle jerk. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to say it. And sorry if I offend anyone, but that's what it is sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe you're on the right path if you're focusing more on content and
Right.
responding to things on the website rather than just like tooting your own horn on Twitter.
I mean, I think there are a couple of challenges with social media. On the Twitter side, it's very ephemeral. Things drift off people's front pages in a matter of seconds. And on Facebook, I think the challenge is that you don't really own your audience or your data, and progressively more and more, Facebook wants to charge you to be able to reach the audience that has already given you permission to reach them. They like you, and then you're like, well, now you like me, I have to pay money for me to say, hey, here's this thing. For me, the thing that I really focused on instead of social media was email, because I knew that I would own that, and that, email is stickier than a Twitter post. You send somebody an email, it stays in their inbox. They have to delete it or unsubscribe or read it. And so that was really my focus, because I felt like it wasn't trendy. It wasn't something that was going to come and go. I'm sure someday there will be something better than email. I don't know if it's the new Google Hangouts or, Google tried Wave and all these different things, but that's been the thing that I focused on, because I felt like it was more evergreen. It wasn't something that was going to come and go and die off. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for social media, and we don't have a social media person, and we don't have enough time to make it more interactive for now.
Koo, we understand you have roughly $93,000 or so from your amazing Kickstarter campaign for Man-Child after fees, taxes, and whatnot in the bank. Yet you've been very transparent and said that this is not currently enough for you to make the first feature film,
Right.
to the level that you want to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that maybe Man-Child is too ambitious of a first feature?
Well, it's certainly an ambitious first feature. I think the jury is out on whether it's too ambitious. There are a couple of things going on with the project other than, constantly working on it and trying to get it made. And I think one of the challenges is that no matter, even if you run a filmmaking website, as I do, and, I won my first filmmaking award 12 years ago, so I've been, pursuing this for a while. But you're always learning things, and there are always things you didn't know when you started it. And, as somebody who's done a lot of DIY productions where not only was I doing a lot of the craft elements as far as being the DP and being the editor and being the sound guy and being the After Effects artist and everything, the stuff that I've done has also been logistically very contained. So, the West Side, my web series, yes, we're out on the streets, but we're walking down the street with no permits, and we didn't have insurance, and we were literally breaking into crack houses and climbing across roofs, and just, there are things that you don't want to do repeatedly for your own health and for the safety of your actors and performers. B, they're illegal. And, C, you definitely don't want to do these things with child actors. So I think, I was certainly a bit naive as far as how far I thought I could stretch $1 on a real production where people are insured and where you're paying for locations and where you're doing things, not in a luxury way, not with trailers, not with, spending a lot of money that doesn't need to be spent, but just the basics of having permits and having insurance and making sure that, the child actors are going to be protected, or the adults, if someone gets hurt. We're filming a sports movie. And so once I was meeting with producers, there are of course producers who are going to push this to be something that you don't want to make it. And that's a challenge, and we're not looking to make this into The Blind Side, or Rudy, or some one of these larger sports movies that you're used to thinking of as a sports movie. But there are it's an educational process to look at a real budget and to say, oh, okay, where are all the ways that we can trim money? And then you get to a point where the movie you wrote is going to be best served by a minimum budget level. And that just wasn't, as you said, we have $93,000 in the bank. And that's even after we made this short. We haven't touched a penny of that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting what's best for your movie. And I could go cut all of the basketball scenes from the script and go make this movie, but they're all there all of those scenes are there for a reason. And so for me, regardless of what the external understanding of what I'm going through is, at the end of the day, I exist to make this film the best it can possibly be. And, I'm going to knock down walls, and I'm going to, take some comments of people, either misconstruing what I'm doing or just feeling like I'm, abandoning the DIY ethos. But ultimately, you want what's best for your film. And I think if you look at most Kickstarter projects, very few of those, their entire budget was raised through Kickstarter. And on my Kickstarter page, I say very clearly, you can go back and look at it because Kickstarter locks your page after your campaign's over and you can't change a word, that I say, I'm looking for a producer, and once I meet with producers, we're going to do a real budget, and then we're going to have some hard decisions to make about whether we cut things from the script or need to raise more money or need to do both. So I think the jury's out on where in between those different options we're going to end up. But, no one said this is going to be easy. And at the end of the day, if it takes me longer to make the film than I wanted to, but I make the movie that I wanted to, I'll take that delay instead of sort of trimming and cutting and turning this into something that wasn't what I wanted to make in the first place.
What's the current state of Manchild right now? We know that you made the beautiful short film that we saw.
The state is we are looking to, I'm working on a new draft of the script, as I always am, but, it is not idle tweaking. I basically spent 4 months of my life making the short, and of course during the production of that, you go back and you read your script and you see some changes you could make based on the experience of having made the short. So working on a new draft, always taking meetings and talking to people about, where we can shoot and, who the cast might be and the crew and just the logistics of the scheduling. It's a logistically very complicated film as far as, most school movies star high schoolers, which means that you just go cast a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and they're all adults, and so they can work long hours, and they're not in school. When you have a 13-year-old lead, it's very unlikely you're going to find an 18-year-old that looks 13. Maybe we will. But all of a sudden, then your days are very short, and you can't be doing it at the same time as the school year, or if you do, you need to go hire a tutor full-time so that they can, your star can be getting an education at the same time as making a movie. So, as far as the school year is concerned, as far as the number of days that you need to shoot because your actual shooting time is very short, it creates a lot of logistical challenges that make this a very challenging first feature. But, I think, and I hope that I proved with the short that all of those challenges are what make this project worth doing. And those are the reasons that this project hasn't been made before. There's part of the reason that it hasn't been made before is because it's not easy. So, we're still taking these meetings and figuring out when we're going to shoot and everything, and things are moving forward. It's just always, you don't know exactly how they're going to move forward until you're on the precipice of actually shooting.
If you could put in a capsule what enabled you to raise $125,000 on Kickstarter, what would be the most important factors?
Audience building. I never would have launched a campaign for 6 figures if I hadn't spent 2 years building an online audience with a website. So, it's one of those 10 years to an overnight success kind of thing where all of the work you've put in the back, you hope, helps you do this thing that was the most ambitious thing I'd ever done in my life as far as, a Kickstarter campaign is all or nothing. And when you hit launch and it says $115,000 and it says $0 and 0 cents, from here to there is a long way to go. But I felt like I had done everything in my power over the last couple of years to build a website, and I felt like enough people knew who I was and that it was a strong enough project with some external validation from IFP and from Lincoln Center, that it was, I felt like if I failed that I would have done everything I possibly could and then I wouldn't feel bad about it. So, the main thing was building an audience, and the way that I went about it is different than a lot of people will, as far as, I was talking about the craft of filmmaking and the behind the scenes stuff, as opposed to just this one particular project. But ultimately, I think it comes down to that approach of saying, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, these things aren't magic. You can make a great video, but ultimately you have to have a feeling of you've been working on this for a long time, and people know who you are and are invested in your success. So it's not, I think the Kickstarter campaigns that don't succeed a lot of the times are ones where people, saw somebody else doing this and thought, oh, well, I can do that too, and they didn't really understand the amount of work that the other people did, the successful campaigns did, not only during their campaign, but before it, when a lot of that work happens.
Let's pretend you were going to run a second crowdfunding campaign. What would you do the same, and what would you do differently this time?
That task seems so daunting. I would have a team. I ran my campaign 100% myself. I didn't have interns or anybody sending emails on my behalf, or anybody doing, helping with me with the video production. I wanted to, I could have probably, but it was just one of those things where, you get efficient at working at the speed of thought and doing things yourself and executing them, that I ended up just doing it myself. But were I to do another Kickstarter campaign, that would definitely not be the case, because obviously there's a lot of things that you need to be doing during the campaign, but there's a lot of things that you could have done had you had more hands on deck. So I think having a team is really valuable, and that was one of the challenges of my project, was that it was just a script. So I didn't have a producer attached, I didn't have actors, I didn't have other people who were invested in the success of this project, who could help not only be on screen in the video, but also just with the tweeting and the Facebooking and the spreading the word and reaching out to contacts. So that would be the main thing, is just having a team in place. That would have been nice.
For someone that doesn't have a team, let's suppose maybe they've built an audience, maybe they've been really diligent with their social media, and again, not to bash social media, I know I said before that sometimes it seems like a giant time waste, but it is valuable, and you do meet great people all across the world. So what would you say, aside from that, what are some of the other things? I mean, you had an amazing pitch video, and I think that's something that a lot of people miss. They just put up a trailer, and they don't include themselves, and so people saw that, okay, well, I want to invest in this guy, even if I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think for me it was something where I was trying to check every box to give myself the best chance of succeeding with the campaign, and one of those was making a video that was entertaining and spoke to other creatives, but not actually having a trailer and not having had anything shot. That was a very particular challenge. And I think that as the campaign was coming together, if I didn't feel like the video was turning out okay, that I would have set a lower goal. Or if I didn't have an audience that I could reach via email, email tens of thousands of people, right when the campaign launched, I would have set a lower goal. So it was kind of like all of those things together is what, I think made the campaign a success, so that it would, not everybody who backed my campaign came from my website, and I think front-loading the work and planning it out is really where the campaign is made or broken for a lot of people, as far as doing the work on the video and planning out, making sure that you're running the campaign during a time where there is no national holiday at a particular point where you're going to be trying to raise money and everyone's gone, or if you're going on vacation yourself in the middle, that's not a great idea. Just sort of having those strategies and front loading the work is really a great way to just to put yourself in the best position.
Can you talk about filmmakers' work ethic? I know you've mentioned before, I think it was on our radio show, that you would actually clock your work, like a time clock, almost like an attorney does for working on a certain client.
Yeah, filmmaking, especially independent filmmaking, is so challenging, because I think a lot of jobs, if you're good at them, if you work really hard, and if you're smart about the work you do, you can make a living doing them, or you can make a lot of money doing them. And sometimes in filmmaking, you can do all of those things and not be making any money. So to me, you know, I knew that I felt like I had to be working really hard at this in addition to having a strategy and having ability, and, you know, that the work itself is not going to get done unless you spend the time doing it. And I'm big on analytics and sort of, you know, numbers cutting through your subjective impression of yourself. And especially as somebody who runs a website, I need to know how much time I'm spending running that website versus how much time I'm spending working on my screenplay, and to not let, you know, the everyday tasks that you need to do, like answering email and the you know, dozen different things I do for No Film School, to push aside the other work that you're doing. So that's why I track hours, is so that I can be honest with myself about, you know, if I think, well, last month I worked really hard on this thing, I can go look at it and say, oh, no, you didn't, you know, or I can say, I'm co-writing another screenplay. Am I letting that overtake this project? Or, you know, if I am consulting or working with somebody else, you know, how much time am I spending on that, and how much is that taking away from, you know, man-child in my project? So I think that's our most limited resource, is time, and therefore that's the most valuable thing to track.
It seems like we all have this level, this to varying degrees of adult ADD with Twitter and Facebook and everybody checking different things. And even when you check email now, there's incoming news headlines and things like that. So how do you minimize distractions for yourself? What are some of the tips, and what are your biggest distractions?
You know, I think we all struggle with this, especially now with email and, you know, feeling like we should be on social media and available. When I'm doing my best at it is when I'm batching these things. So I'll go carve out a 4-hour chunk to work on a screenplay where, you know, you can use an application like on the Mac. There's something called Freedom, where you shut off your internet and it won't let you on the internet unless you know, restart your computer, and then, you know, you feel terrible about yourself because you couldn't stay off the internet for 4 hours. What kind of screenwriter are you? So I think, you know, if you're able to step back from it and think about, do I really need to be on my email, you know, once every half hour or more? The answer is no, you know. So I think sort of managing your time in that sense and carving out large chunks of time where you're not available is the key thing to being productive, I think. But, you know, I struggle with it in the same way that everybody else does. And you know, when you're going and you're checking your email for the third time in 10 minutes, it's just, it can be really hard. So I think sometimes having those tools and that separation, you know, whether that be physically getting up and going somewhere else and making sure you don't get distracted, all of those approaches can help, but it's definitely a challenge that I think all of us face.
So forgive me, Koo, I thought you had mentioned before that you did some couch surfing, or that when you were first, you know, working on the website, you stayed at a friend's house or you did something.
Yeah. No, I actually, you know, I worked at MTV for 3 years, and I got laid off with 700 other MTV employees in the same day. And after that, I went and I had a project called Third Rail, which is a murder mystery on a New York City subway train that is sort of interactive and transmedia. And, you know, we had an agent, and we went out to LA and we pitched that. I spent a lot of time taking meetings and making script revisions and what amounted to a lot of free work, you know, because people are always set up at one place and they want you to make these changes, and all of a sudden you're realizing that your job is to be on conference calls and to be taking meetings, not actually making movies. So my experience coming back to New York from that was, I felt like the projects that I want to make are risky. And I felt like the people I was meeting with in Hollywood, their job was to mitigate risk. You know, if they take risks and they fail, then they lose their job. So I wanted to come back and have something that I owned that I could hopefully turn into some sort of regular income stream that would allow me to make risky projects without having to say yes to something that I wasn't interested in doing. You know, some of our pitches were, oh, well, you know, this doesn't really fit into our wheelhouse. This isn't our mandate, but if you want to do something with this, you know, comic book property that we own, you know, pitch us something based on that. That's not what I wanted to do. So that's when I came back and I wanted to start no film school, but having been laid off from my job, I didn't have any income, and I knew that starting a website from scratch was going to take, if it ever took off, would take a long time. So the best thing I could do was cut out my need to pay rent, get my bills down as low as they could possibly be. And so thankfully I had some friends I could stay with, so I was in several states. I was in Costa Rica for a while, which was great. It's cheaper than New York, and their beaches are amazing. And the cost of living in New York is so high that essentially I just moved out of my apartment, and then I lived a lot of different places where any place that had internet access, I could be launching the website, I could be blogging, I could be putting up new posts and researching what to do. So that was great, and I think so much of pursuing a creative career is taking risks, and the risk versus reward of leaving your day job is a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. And whenever I get a chance, I always encourage people, you know what, especially, if you're at a time where you don't have, kids depending on you, if you're at a time where the risk of losing your regular income stream is great, it's probably going to get greater the older you get. So if you believe in yourself and you want to pursue this artistic pursuit, then there's probably no time like the present. And I think a lot of times it's hard because you don't know what it's going to look like or what you're going to do. But there's no really way to find that out until you give yourself some space from, 8 hours a day of doing somebody else's bidding. And so for me, it was, I have to do this. I always said at MTV that I was going to be my last day job. And so it was me sticking to my word and, putting my money where my mouth is, or putting my lack of money where, I don't know, that analogy gets mixed up. But, I think I had to do it, and thankfully it worked out. But, I imagine what would have happened if I just did the safe thing and I just took another day job. And I was a senior designer at MTV. You can make great money doing, design. You can make better money doing that than, filmmaking for the most part. But so I think taking that risk was the best thing I could have done. And, you have to make sacrifices to do that. And for me, it was, well, I'm not going to have an address for a year. But it was absolutely, it was great.
What advice can you give to someone else? Maybe they're not even a filmmaker, but they're, quote, sleeping on someone's couch. I've been there, and there's a feeling of sort of powerlessness, and you're like, am I ever going to come out of this? So what are some of the tips you can give to other people that, I'm sure you had some pretty dark nights of the soul, or maybe you didn't, and it gets scary, but then you came out, and now things are better. So how did you do that? How did you kind of keep those commitments to yourself? Because there are probably days when you could get lost and say, you know what, I'm going to find the safe route again.
I think for filmmaking and for creative pursuits, one of the biggest challenges is when you need permission. And so the whole idea for me getting away from pitching things in LA during that stretch was, and that's how I launched my career, was just making a web series and putting it up online and not requiring somebody else's permission or approval. And I think what it comes down to is just doing the work. We can be here talking about it, and you can do consultancies, and you can write blog posts, but ultimately, that's the other reason I track hours, is to make sure that you're doing the work at the end of the day. And, the more things you can do that don't require someone else, the better, as far as getting your foot in the door, making something, putting it out there, and, hopefully getting attention for it and moving on to the next step. So, we're all going to run into writer's block. We're all going to have those dark nights where, is what I'm doing, is it terrible? Am I ever going to make it at this? But for me, the work ethic and just sitting down there and focusing on the work is what keeps me on track, because I believe in failing forward. So you're going to learn as much from something that failed, if not more, than you are from something that was successful. So therefore, the only real formula is to just keep doing the work.
It sounds like you weren't doing too much ruminating. You were just doing it. Like, not a lot of, ooh, is this? It sounds like you were just. Like you said, just putting in.
We're all introspective. Rumination can be great as an artist, but my big thing is just no complaining. No whining, no complaining. We all are struggling with, massive obstacles, and complaining gets you nowhere. So,
do you feel you made a mistake skipping film festivals just to go directly to the audience with amateur? I mean, it's been, 2 months, I guess, since you've posted the short online. Do you wish you'd gone the film festival route, or was this your whole plan to just post it online? And
that's something that I will wonder about, and that's one of the challenges of filmmaking, is that one movie comes out and you think it's really good and no one went to see it. Meanwhile, a lot of people are going to see something else, and you don't know whether it's the strategy of it, why that is. I think that's one of the harder things about filmmaking, is that the success of your project is predicated on so many different things, and there's no real way to go back and change it. So to me, the releasing a short online for free, the success of that is predicated on how do we reach the sports world. And the film launch couldn't have gone better. On day one, we're on the front page of IndieWire, Filmmaker Magazine, Short of the Week, Director's Notes. It's a Vimeo staff pick. I think that the strategy of releasing it for free online instead of going to festivals was sound, but that does open you up to the vagaries of the news cycle. And so the day I released it, the day I premiered it, was when the Boston Marathon bombings happened. And that's not only a huge news story, as it should be, but it's also a sports-related story. So any website that I was reaching out to that I had initial contact with, suddenly they had, many, many, many stories to do for weeks about this. And the following week, Jason Collins became the first NBA player to come out of the closet. Another huge news story, as it should be. Meanwhile, the NBA playoffs are going on at the same time. So I think, I have a lot of experience with strategy and planning and all these things, and I think my strategy was sound, but no matter what your strategy is, things will always happen that make it, there are a lot of moving parts. And so I was trying to get out in front of the NBA playoffs, but that window closed when the Boston Marathon bombings happened. And I can't complain about that, because obviously a lot of people have really, really terrible things that happened as a result of that. But you're over in this little filmmaking world, and you're like, I can't complain, but this thing really made my little film release more challenging. So I don't necessarily know that it's online release only versus film festivals. The short is still going to be playing at some film festivals, despite the fact that it's online. And I think there are a lot of talking points there, as far as some festivals have a policy that they will play stuff that played online, and some have a policy that they won't. But there's a lot of gray area as far as, what's your exposure been online? Do you need to take it down during the time it's playing at the festival? Are you playing out of competition because you are online? There are a lot of things that I think, for me, it's worth it just to explore those issues from my perspective firsthand, based on experience, and I'll be sharing what I find on No Film School. But the jury is still out as far as the strategy of releasing a short, who we've been able to reach. We're going to be releasing it on YouTube with sort of a different strategy as kind of a second wave. And I'm still talking to a number of websites that I hope it will end up on. And ultimately, my approach with making the short in general, as opposed to releasing it online, was that it's going to be a great thing for the feature, regardless of how it turns out and who sees it. Because for me, it's a proof of concept, and it's getting on the set and working at a certain pace and finding good crew members, and just the on-set reps of making a movie in this genre. But I think there are a lot of different approaches you could take with a short. One would be, okay, you make it, you hold it back. If you're trying to raise fundraising, you approach investors privately with a screening. It's good, they feel special, they're invested in making this happen because they feel like they've had special access. That would be one way of doing it. The other is to submit to film festivals and wait, and hopefully, you play a prestigious festival, maybe you even win some award, and that kind of validation allows you to then go pitch to investors. And while it's still not online, I think I'll always wonder about these different approaches, but there's really no way of knowing beforehand, oh, this is right, oh, this is wrong, this will work, this won't. And for me, ever since I got started, I've always felt that, there's a place for drama and for quality content online, and that's always been a goal of mine. So it just made sense to go with this approach, especially as we've been in pre-production on Man-Child and in development for so long that waiting for a festival or doing these things behind closed doors was only gonna, make the delay longer. So I wanted to rush, and I wanted to put it out there and have people see it. It's a work I'm extremely proud of, and so that was ultimately kind of the decision maker as far as putting it online. It's a short prequel, so you want people to watch it and feel like they want to see more. And in that sense, the more people that see it, the better.
In terms of dealing with your plan of action and then the world, acts of God, whatever, things coming in and taking over. I mean, we've heard so many people say, well, I've launched a crowdfunding campaign, but then this crowdfunding campaign or this world event happened. It sounds like your plan is just to keep going, not complain, and just proceed as normal. Or are there times that maybe people should pull back and say, you know what, this is probably the wrong time to do this?
I think when you're sort of spread thin and you're overworked and you're just pushing forward yourself, there is no really pulling back. I would love to have a number of consultants and we have a meeting and everyone strategizes and we break and we come back a week from now and then we plan this other thing. But, it's me pushing the rock up the hill. And so I feel like anytime I, let go of the rock, it's just rolling back down. So for me, yeah, just the momentum of it and keep pushing and have the attitude that this is going to happen with or without whoever's involvement. Whoever you're meeting with next, you're making it, and hopefully they want to be on board, and if not, you're making it anyway. That's kind of the approach I have, and I guess there'll be plenty of time in the future to take meetings and pause and strategize and take our time with it. But I'm not letting go of that rock at this point.
Let's talk about Amateur, what you shot it on, how you secure the locations.
Yeah, so Amateur, is the short prequel for Man-Child, and it came about because I felt that making a short was the last box I could check as far as, okay, I'm going to write the script. Is the script good? Does it get recognition from, places like IFP and Lincoln Center? Does it get a grant from Tribeca? Okay, those boxes are checked. It's been externally validated. Okay, what's next? Well, can I run a crowdfunding campaign that's big enough that shows people, hey, there's interest in this movie, and that I have an audience that would end up, result in me bringing, 6 figures of financing to the table myself in addition to the script. Okay, that box is checked. What else can I do? Okay, let's see if I can make a short that's a proof of concept, that's the same genre, that shows I can direct basketball and I understand the sport, that shows I can direct young African-American actors, because the entire movie, the star of the movie is in every single scene. It's not going to be a movie where there's a bunch of adults talking and that's the majority of the film. So the short came about because I wanted to do something that was of the same genre and actually has some of the same characters as the feature as a proof of concept. And when I initially had the idea for it, it was starting out very small. I was thinking about shooting it myself, and most of it was going to take place in school hallways, which I figured would be easier to secure than an actual gymnasium. And at the time, I was meeting with my producer Chip Horahan, who produced Frozen River and Any Day Now, and we were talking about the feature. And I sent him over the short script, and he liked it a lot. And all of a sudden, now the team is 2. All of a sudden, I'm scouting gyms in New York City. He's scouting gyms in New Jersey. It's coming together. I went and met with my DP, Greg Wilson, who he and I, again, had a number of conversations about the feature. He had read the script, and I sent him the script for the short and said, hey, I'm trying to make this, soon, really soon. And then our team was 3. So all of a sudden we had multiple people calling in favors, and it was becoming larger than what I had originally imagined, but in a good way, because I wrote it to be something that was very achievable. Knowing all of the challenges that the feature is facing, I essentially started with, what can I write that is basically a conversation between 2 people in one location? And can I make it dramatic, and can I make it rewarding? And all of that is going to be dependent on you know, the writing and the directing and the performances and the story, all of which are the most important things in filmmaking. So there was that sort of challenge that I set out for myself. Thankfully, Chip and Greg were also, you know, pushing the ball up the hill, and we were able to call in just a lot of favors, because one of the great things about doing a weekend shoot is someone, you know, might be available that weekend. They're not working otherwise, so you can go get equipment or personnel for less than it would have been. You know, that's one of the challenges when you're shooting a movie for 20 or 30 days. You can't call in a favor for 20 or 30 days. So, you know, originally we were going to shoot it on my Red Scarlet, and Greg, my DP, hadn't shot on Red before, so it was a good opportunity for him. I mean, not that he hasn't shot on things that high end. I mean, he's shooting on Alexas and things, but getting the Red experience was going to be good either way. But then when the weekend rolled around, because we've been already talking to rental houses through all of our connections, other equipment became available through friends from the rental house. We didn't know what lenses we would be shooting on until the day before, when they said, hey, we have these Arri zooms available. And we said, okay, great, we're shooting on that now. So we ended up not even touching my Red Scarlet, because Greg's friend rents an Epic that was available. So all of a sudden we were shooting on that, and I think for an online release, you probably can't tell the difference between 4K and 5K. And but of course, it was just, well, we have a better camera, we'll use that. It's not costing us anything. Like, it literally would have been more expensive for us to go buy a T4i DSLR and bring it to set and shoot on that, because we were able to get you know, equipment based on a favor. So, you know, the idea was that I didn't want to make excuses for this short, other than the challenges of the locations and the fact that it's, you know, not necessarily an action-packed, like, viral online video with music and special effects and everything. I mean, I think there are challenges of releasing it online in that sense, but I didn't want to have to make excuses for the production quality, the sound quality, you know, the gym. Like, these are all things that are, as a trio, we were able to secure and to scout. And you know, once you have a good DP, you know, Greg has connections to crew members, and you know, we paid people, but we didn't pay people what, you know, they would have been paid if this was a mayonnaise commercial. So we were able to bring it in, and, you know, I think the production quality is really high. You know, we had one sound guy, not two, and he was able to do the booming and the mixing and everything himself. And so really we were able to pull it together, and I'm really proud of it. And so hopefully, you know, that proof of concept is going to be checking that last box that I spoke of, and saying, oh, okay, now I get the vision for the feature, and now I get the level of you know, performance and storytelling that you know, makes you want to see the feature. And you know, we'll see what comes henceforth from releasing this.
So you had 48 hours, was that right, to do the entire film, or just to use the gym?
Oh, we didn't have 48 hours to use the gym. We actually we wrapped the gym in a single day, and the challenge was, so Chip, my producer, found this great location, this gym in Edison, New Jersey, and we went and we scouted it, and we said, this is great. The challenge was that a kid's soccer game had the gym reserved in the middle of the day. So, you know, it was a weekend shoot, a day and then a night. You can't really do a night and then a day, because the crew is going to, you know, there's going to be no turnaround time. So we had to shoot the gym on Saturday and the exterior night on Sunday. So we couldn't, you know, avoid this kid's soccer game. So yeah, we had one day in the gym, and in the middle, we had to move all our equipment. The kids come in, play their soccer game, and then continue shooting, which meant that we ended up shooting a number of things out of order, which meant that, you know, we had less time in the gym, but we were able to schedule our lunch when they were in the gym, and then go shoot our locker room scene and then come back. But literally we were picking up, you know, there's a couple edits where someone's having a conversation and it's a two-shot, and then the close-up that you're cutting to was, you know, 4 hours later after these kids had played a soccer game, and we're trying to match our lighting, and there were a lot of logistical challenges to the short that I hope don't show up when you watch it, especially given the fact that you know, the short opens with some action, and that always takes time to film to get it right and to have the action match. And and it's a single camera shoot, so we're recovering things from multiple angles. So most of that short, of that 9-minute short, 75% of that is shot after lunch on day one in the gym. So it's not a luxurious situation to be saying, oh, okay, take 16, we're going. No, it's very few takes. It is moving very quickly. It's everyone sort of, making sacrifices as far as what you can do with lighting, how many takes you can get, even just changing the staging because the lights are in a certain way and you can get to the scene faster if you don't, move over there. So I think, it was a really good set of challenges to face, to be able to prove myself in that environment. And, I'm proud of what we ended up with, regardless of all of those challenges, but especially because, when you know what you went through as a filmmaker, the audience is never going to know that. So you sort of just have to be internally proud about what you were able to achieve given the limited circumstances you had.
How many people then were on the crew? Was it 5 or?
We had a sizable crew. It was definitely the largest crew I'd ever worked with because the crew was greater than myself. I'm used to, on our web series that we did, Zach Lieberman, my co-director, he and I were the crew. So we were the sound, camera, everything. This was actually the first time that I'd stepped onto a set and my name was on the slate. And action. Oh, this is great. I'm not pulling focus. I can actually give the actor a note and not, be distracted by the fact that I blew a focus pull myself at the same time. So, I think there were about 12 people on set, including, cast. So, but, we were able to get a lot out of our crew, and some of that was, people who came on last minute for free. But yeah, that was definitely, it was good to be able to have access to the lighting setup that we had, and be able to have, a great DIT, Tom Wong, on set, who's done a lot of red stuff, and just to be, working with professionals is, there's no substitute for it. So it was great to, be able to get as much as we did in a short amount of time because everybody was proficient at their job and everyone was on the same page.
Can you tell us about the car that was in the...
Right, so there's a car in the short, and if you haven't seen the short, go to manchildfilm.com and watch it so we don't, spoiler alert. So yeah, we needed this car, and it needed to be a nice car in the short, and it's actually a zip car. So, if you go rent a car from a rental house, you're going to show up and they're going to give you a different car than what you signed up for. It's impossible to know the color of the vehicle you're getting. So I didn't realize that Zipcar had luxury vehicles, but they do. And so the funny thing was we were actually going to shoot the exterior scene on day one. So I went and I rented a Zipcar, and it was a Mercedes, and I show up to set on the first day in a Mercedes, and I'm like, great, this is a low-budget, scrappy short, and the director's like, we can't pay you, but, and then I'm pulling up in a Mercedes. So we didn't get that shot in the first day, because, as I said, we wrapped the whole gym in a day, so we're going to day two, and which was fine because we were shooting day two anyway, but it just meant I needed to rent the car again. And so on day two, I get a call from Zipcar, and for those who don't have Zipcar in their city, Zipcar is a place where you can rent a vehicle by the hour as opposed to by the day, and you remember, and the gas and insurance is included. The thing I was worried about was that there could be a big Zipcar sticker on the back, and that would kind of ruin it, but thankfully their luxury vehicles, at least right now, don't have branding on it. So day two, I get a call from Zipcar saying, we're sorry, sir, but the Zipcar you have reserved was just in an accident and is no longer available. So it's classic Murphy's Law indie film stuff. Like, you try and imagine everything that can go wrong, but I didn't imagine that my car is smashed up by the side of the road right now, the one that I had reserved. So I said to them, well, this is a strange request, but I need you to find me that same vehicle for all day, or at least a vehicle close to it. And, I rented a silver one so that it would show up at night in the lights better as opposed to a black or dark blue or something. So, even just having the vehicle was a challenge. But then, of course, on day two, here I am showing up on set in a different luxury vehicle than I did on day one. So I show up in a Mercedes on day one, and then on day two, I show up in a BMW. And it's like, yeah, indie film, that's how we do things over here. We don't spend the money on the personnel. We spend it all on our transport to the set, apparently. So in addition to the zip car being a certain challenge, the other challenge we faced was we did a casting call and we read our actors, but for the mother and father were just offers based on a headshot and a reel, and the actors that we originally had playing the mother and father, and who are described in the sides as driving a car. This is a problem you only face in New York. Neither of them had a driver's license, and neither of them had ever driven a car. And so when they showed up, we said, wait a second, you're showing up to play the role of driver, and you've never driven a vehicle, and that wasn't something that you thought you might want to let us know. So not only did we have a car be, a vehicle get taken out of commission because it was in an accident, but we also had drivers who couldn't drive. So doing it on day 2 was a necessity for numerous reasons.
Was it just a stationary? They did drive off, right?
Yeah, no, they drive up and drive off.
I thought, yeah.
So at one point I'm talking to my producer, can you drive up, as a white guy, like wearing gloves or something, and then we'll cut to the close-up and we'll swap in the actor playing the African-American driver, and then we'll cut back to the wide and you'll drive the car off. And I'm thinking about like, oh gosh, am I going to be in After Effects, like trying to switch somebody in, like, all the sort of things that could go wrong there. But thankfully we ended up just bringing in an actor who could actually drive a car, and that was the best solution. So.
What were the things that you were pre-planning for? You've always talked about, you said that with your Kickstarter campaign, you front-loaded all of the work. So what did you front-load in terms of this short film?
The casting was the big thing. I cast a great actor, Lionel Pena, as the recruiter, and I knew him because he was the town boss in my web series from several years ago. And Lionel's a trooper. He's been in a number of movies, and I felt that having him on board from day one would really help us as far as being able to do a casting call and being able to read our two leads together to see what kind of chemistry they had, as opposed to just with a casting director, with myself. So that was kind of the big thing. I knew this was going to be a film that was made or broken in the performances, especially with Curtis Cook Jr. as the basketball player. It's a very nuanced role that you have to be able to play. You have to be able to be believable as a basketball player, both from the physicality of playing the sport, but also from your attitude and the way you carry yourself. You have to show that you're a highly competitive athlete, but your performance also has to have a certain vulnerability. Again, go see the short if you haven't seen it. Spoiler alert. But he's sandbagging. He's playing dead. He's playing possum a little bit, and so you have to be able to show vulnerability as well. So that to me was the big thing, was finding the right actor. And Curtis showed up, was the only actor we read that didn't have a headshot, and just nailed it. And the rest of the day, it was who can beat Curtis. And then I did a callback. So I think a lot of the front loading of the preparation, you don't want to get on set and find out and find an unpleasant surprise. So to me, this is a basketball movie that needs to have convincing basketball. One of the problems that you're faced with when you're making a Hollywood sports film is that this actor really wants to be in it, but maybe that actor can't actually hoop. So then you have a guy who can't really dribble and has a broken-looking jump shot, and you're cutting to the rim and the ball goes in. This is expressly not that film, This is a movie that I think has to appeal both to indie film fans and real basketball fans as a fan and player myself. So the casting call, the callbacks are scheduled to be 2 days later in a casting room, and I couldn't have that. So on Monday for our Tuesday callbacks, I'm calling gyms in Manhattan, and I say I need to reserve an hour in your gym. Day before, less than 24 hours notice, and I managed to find a place. So we did our callbacks there. So not only did we reread, the full scenes and really sort of have our best actors come back, but I also was able to set the actors and play one-on-one against each other and see what they could and couldn't do, and see who really could handle a ball and who could shoot, and find out, what they can and can't do, in the sense that then I could direct towards their strengths on the court and not be wasting time on set finding out that oh, I've written something for you to do that you're not very good at, but you're really convincing it this other thing, so we're going to waste a bunch of time shooting this one thing and then making an adjustment to go to this other thing. So that way I could walk on set already having it choreographed in my head. And, on my web series, The West Side, there's a lot of action, there's gunfights, there's a lot of After Effects, there's always special effects in there, and we didn't do a single storyboard. I feel very comfortable knowing screen direction. I've been editing for 12 years. I think were we doing visual effects or something, I would definitely want a storyboard for those purposes, but I feel very comfortable walking into a set knowing where to put the camera and how to get continuous action. So it was more the front loading of the performance and the ability to play the sport and knowing what was going to happen on screen, more so than it was the front loading of storyboarding and previs or anything like that. I did a shot list. That was my main planning. And then on the set, I ended up having to kill a lot of the shots, of course, to make the day, given that we were doing, 7.5 pages in a day or something, plus basketball action. So I think the front loading is really just making sure that, trying to minimize the number of unpleasant surprises that you're going to face on the day.
Where did you post the casting notice for Amateur?
So we actually had a casting director, Matthew Wolf, and a casting associate, Celia Au, on this short. And I'm used to doing casting myself and posting it on, Backstage and Actors Access. And but one of the things when we were trying to get this short made quickly, and I think as soon as you're, trying to compress a timeline, the best thing you can do is let other people do their job. So that's a question for them. I did have some friends on Facebook say, hey, I just saw a posting for something that you're directing on my actor's feed. But I didn't, honestly, I didn't know where that was. My job was just as a director to show up and not just see who could nail a role, but then how they take direction and take them off in a few different directions. And from there, it was a matter of rehearsal. I think the nice thing about casting a short is that someone can go read the entire piece and know the arc and know what's coming, so that they come in, they're not just reading a scene context free. So you really, with a 9-page script, you really get a sense of who grasps the character, but do they understand the complexities, and can they make the turn at the end? So that was nice to be able to have that and have actors come in and just completely get the performance and get the character. Felt great as the screenwriter. And then as a director, we did a rehearsal at my apartment the day before the shoot, which was really what allowed us to, on the day, be making small tweaks, as opposed to having to do a global redo and say, okay, this scene is way too blank, and we need to get on target during, while you're burning through money on the set. So, the short being there's very definite arcs in each character. There's a very definite power dynamic that is shifting, and to be able to rehearse and sort of say, okay, what your level of confidence is at this point, and how knowing where it's going, and to sort of break down each individual scene and have that tone already, have all of us be on the same page already going into the day, is really what allowed us to achieve what we achieved, given the page count and the number of setups we were doing, in what is essentially, except for the last scene, a 1-day shoot.
So your strategy with Amateur, transitioning into Man-Child, the feature, what's on deck? What do you have planned?
Right, the strategy of releasing Amateur free online is really about, other than it being a long time since I've released a film that I directed, and just sort of having that feeling of like, oh, good, this thing is out there, and I feel like that is worth a lot right there. But really, the strategy is reaching the sports world and the basketball world. This is a story that I think hasn't been told before. I'm talking about the feature, and I think there's a lot of interest in that, as far as there's an ongoing suit against the NCAA from Sonny Vaccaro about should college athletes be paid. I think a lot of people don't know how young the recruiting has gotten. I think a lot of basketball players have gone through this themselves. A lot of hooks in the basketball world. So the reason that I released it free online was to reach that world. And we're going to be releasing on YouTube and making sort of a second launch for the short to that end. And I would just say that for anybody who's watching this, if you have sports or basketball connections, I think those are the people that I'm really trying to get in front of. So email me at ryan@manchildfilm.com, and I think really what to sort of talk about what we're doing with No Film School. That's the site exists for everybody to be helping each other, and I think the site is going to be more of that going forward as we redesign. And it's amazing putting this out there and hearing from other filmmakers in the community, people saying, hey, I know this guy there, get in touch with him. Like, I've met great people that way. And the lesson has been that cold emails basically just go nowhere, and I get cold emails all the time. The offshoot of that is that I know how to write them. At least I'm not writing 10 paragraphs, and I'm trying to make things very easy on people when I'm still not hearing back. So that's kind of the challenge. But the great thing about the filmmaking community is that, this guy knows that guy, and they pass it on, and people really like your short, and then things are in motion because of that. So releasing Amateur Online has been just another example of sort of the community and the networking making something possible, and hopefully at the end of the day, that's going to be what makes this feature get made. Not just the crowdfunding and the Kickstarter and the No Film School audience, but also just filmmakers talking to each other and helping each other out is really that's really what my site is all about. And hopefully at the end of the day, Manchild will be a good example of that too.